With Geneva talks starting today, President Donald Trump said Ukraine should immediately come to the table.
The president's nightmare scenario here is the war in Ukraine continues into 2017 or into 2027 or 2028 when China invades Taiwan.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex, and thank to Ryan McBeth for launching a fundraiser for generators and EcoFlow for Ukraine that can finally sit here. I'm now in t-shirt, not in coat, because my EcoFlow is running. And thank you so much, Ryan. And you can donate on this fundraiser in description or in a pin comment. And today in our program, as I said, we're joined by Ryan McBeth, OSINT analyst, cybersecurity expert, and author, YouTube creator. Ryan McBeth, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Watching you last week in your coat. It was cold here in Maryland, but I wasn't wearing a coat inside. We were talking earlier that Maryland normally gets down to about 40, 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which I guess would be, I don't know, 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, maybe 2 degrees Celsius. Oh, I guess 0 to 4 degrees Celsius. But it doesn't usually get colder than that. But it was like in the teens, which, I don't know, negative 3 or 4 Celsius maybe. I'm just making those numbers up. I don't know what they mean. but it got cold. And my houses in Maryland aren't made for the extreme cold because it's pretty temperate here. But I'm looking at you. I'm like, my God, we need to do something. So I'm working with Johnny Rogers of Help Is on the Way UA. And we're just trying to raise $10,250 for generators and EcoFlow batteries, and we're almost there. I think we're at about 7,000. I mean, I'm not Jake Bro, with his like fleets of vehicles and millions of dollars.
$1 million.
He's the real pro. Jake is the real pro. That guy, he's amazing. But I'm doing what I can.
Ryan. If we turn to a topic of video, Russia failed to ban Telegram in 2020. Now it's trolling the platform and pushing the state app Max, which bundles government services and payments. If Telegram is fully blocked on April 1, is the Kremlin planning to use public dependence on Max as the leverage it lacked in 2020? And is the timing meant to cut recruits off from raw frontline footage that's hurting mobilization?
Yeah, I certainly believe that's the case. So Max is kind of like a government app. It's a social media site, but you can also like check government benefits with it or contact them for federal services and so on. So there is a benefit to using Max, but I think that Russia's in this really weird place right now because they have all this footage from the front lines, and if you're a young man in Russia or even an older man in Russia, I think they'll take what they can get at this point, and you're watching that footage. The amount of money that Russia has to offer a kontraktniki, a contractor, has to increase every time they see someone getting blown up because they start doing the math and they realize, you know what, I might not come back from this. And in fact, I think even relatively recently, there's really no demobilization going on. Like you might sign a 6-month contract, but magically it never seems to end. And that is an absolute nightmare for a lot of Russians involved. That these guys, they think they're signing a contract for 6 months and then there's no real way to get released from service. And now you're serving essentially until you get blown up.
After unauthorized Starlink terminals were blocked on February 1, Russian C2 reportedly degraded and loss ratios peaked. Engineers may need 4 6 months to build an alternative network. At the same time, President Donald Trump and his administrations are pushing Kyiv toward urgent talks in Geneva. Do you see this 4 6 months communications gap as a deliberate Western leverage point to strengthen Ukraine's negotiation position?
I think it could be. Kind of the issue here is that there are some weapon systems that don't necessarily need that communication. I mean, Russia has mapped out every inch of cities like Kyiv. So it knows where to send its Shahed drones, right? Or it's, I think they call it the Grom 2, I think. They know where, or the Grom 2, they know where their fixed targets are. The question is mobile targets. And if Russia starts using things like loitering munitions, which are a little more expensive but have a little bit of AI in there, those aren't necessarily controlled by Starlink. You could theoretically set up 2 radio transmitters that are constantly transmitting, and as long as you know where you start from, you'll always be able to know your location just by getting the direction to those 2 radio transmitters. It's resection. You just draw a line to those transmitters and draw a line backwards, and that's exactly where you are. So there are ways around it. And in fact, you can even do it with one transmitter if you have that transmitter rotating, let's say every 30 seconds, and it transmits a character on 30 degrees to 60 degrees, it's B, and 60 to 90, it's C. And from that, if you know where you started from, you can kind of figure out where you're going based on the angle and the letter that you're getting. So, it doesn't help, but it might not be as devastating as you might think to Russia's war machine and their ability to use drones for targeting.
With Geneva talks starting today, President Donald Trump said Ukraine should immediately come to the table. Why address that message primarily to Kyiv rather than Moscow, given that ending the war ultimately depends on Putin and Russia?
Well, that's always been kind of the issue, because it's easier to bully Ukraine than it is to bully Russia. I think that one of the issues with the current president is that I think that he has people telling him, guys like Elbridge Colby in the Pentagon, that we need to pivot to Asia. We need to worry about China. And, I can tell you this: we're all going to be, everyone in America is going to be speaking Chinese in 10 years if we don't stop shooting tomahawks at camels. All right, like we're worried about Iran right now, which is something to be worried about. But we're spending a lot of time looking at Iran when we kind of should be pivoting over to Asia. So I think the president's nightmare scenario here is the war in Ukraine continues into 2017 or into 2027 or 2028 when China invades Taiwan. And now we're dealing with a war in Taiwan, and we're dealing with a war in Europe. And the even greater nightmare scenario is, what if Russia collapses? And now you have a state that is fractured into multiple warlord states, each controlled by a warlord with access to nuclear weapons. Now, these nuclear weapons are still going to have their permissive action links or their codes to activate. That's still going to be controlled by Moscow. But you can still sell that nuclear weapon to someone else. You can get the plutonium out of it. It's not a situation that you really want to be in, right? So I think that the main fear is that if this war doesn't stop, even with conditions that are unfavorable to Ukraine, what you're risking with every passing day is a collapsed Russia. And when that collapsed Russia happens, you have nuclear weapons that are strewn all over this continent that you then have to go and, I don't want to say protect, but secure in some way. And so you're trying to do that while fighting China. That's going to be very difficult. In fact, one of the smartest things that China could do is China could certainly say, hey, you know what we should do is let's wait until Russia collapses and then we'll invade Taiwan. So while Europe and America are dealing with these feuding warlord states in Russia, we try to walk right into Taiwan. That would be ideal. And so I can see the president wanting to just stop this war, just even if the conditions are unfavorable, just because we have to worry about this pivot to China.
After the Starlink shutdown, some sectors reportedly saw Russian loss ratio jump from 5 to 1, and elite drone struggled to coordinate deep strikes. Is it realistic for Russia defense industry to deploy a stable network using LTE towers and stratospheric platforms under active Ukrainian EV pressure within 4-6 months? Or could this communications gap become a turning point for their offensive capacity?
Well, this war has been going on for 4 years, technically longer than World War II. And we've had a lot of turning points. HIMARS was a turning point. F-16s are a turning point. I think it's gonna make it more difficult for Russia to actually fight. And if the electronic warfare environment using terrestrial communications is contested, it's going to make it harder, but it's not going to make it impossible. Because electronic warfare can't be everywhere at once. Now, one good thing about electronic warfare is that, or at least one good thing about terrestrial, let's say LTE communications, is that you'll be able to detect where they are because they're emitting, right? And it's like a cell tower. It's how your phone connects to a cell tower. It's emitting. So you'll be able to find those and target those fairly easily, but that's another munition that Ukraine is expending on a platform as opposed to killing Russians with that weapon system, right? Because that weapon system can hit a supply depot, or it can hit a group of soldiers, or it can hit a cell tower that Russia put up for guidance. So there's a lot of options there, and none of them are good for Russia, but I don't think any of them would actually change the way things are. It just makes it more difficult. And, this whole war has been an effort of spy versus spy. In Mad Magazine, which is this American cartoon magazine, there was this cartoon called Spy versus Spy. And one spy wore white and one spy wore black, and they were both always trying to fight each other. Like, one would try to plant a bomb, and the other had like a bomb detector, but the bomb detector had a bomb in it, and like it was, there's measure and then there's countermeasure. So if Starlink gets shut off, the countermeasure is put up LTE towers. Then Ukraine launches radar-guided missiles at those LTE towers, so then Russia comes up with another solution. Might be optical, might be AI, but there's always going to be situations where you're having to react to what the adversary is doing.
Hey, I want to sincerely thank you for purchasing this UFO and for the incredible support of my friend and my sponsor of my channel, Morgan Lamp, and as well as all the supporters and sponsors who helped me make this content so much better. Thank you guys, and see you soon.